1958. Here with us this afternoon, we have Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller, City of Albuquerque Chief Administrative Officer Lawrence Rayel, AFR Fire Chief Emily Jaramillo, ACS Director Mariela Ruiz Angel, City Councilor Brooke Bassan, City Councilor Tammy Feeblecorn, City Councilor Renee Grout, IAFF Local 244 President Miguel Tittman, and Albuquerque Ambulance Chief Julia Hines. Now for the invocation. I'd like to invite Battalion Chief Will McMullen, who will lead us in the invocation.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here and for allowing me to give this invocation on behalf of the Albuquerque Fire Rescue Chaplains. I think it is critically important that we do not let the phrases never forget or remember become ubiquitous, meaningless phrases. Every year on this day, we must use our wisdom and our introspection to derive deep meaning, practical meaning for us in our lives from the heroic examples of 9/11. For me, I think of two concepts that people of all faiths and creeds can understand. Those are deriving meaning from this life that is greater than this life, and placing the welfare of others before our own. There are many spiritual paths, but I think all of them hold these two concepts as foundational to their teachings. In fact, I think these two concepts are perhaps a wonderful definition of spirituality in general. These are two things I'm trying to remember today, and two things that the heroes of 9/11 set a breathtaking example for. By their actions, they gave meaning well beyond the bounds of their own lives, a wealth of meaning that we, 22 years later, are still unpacking, a treasury of meaning. And one of those jewels is their astonishing example of selflessness and service to others. Since then, the world has not become more peaceful. It has not become less divisive or less tragic. In fact, I think we can say that the adversity of the human experience is perhaps as great as it has ever been. We are constantly faced with the tsunami of human suffering that we witness in the world. And because of that, we need to understand and emulate the examples of our heroes that subordinated themselves and their own wishes for the good of others. This is our collective prayer, that we will find meaning in the sacrifices of others and derive strength from their strength, to set an example ourselves of being humble enough and confident enough to prioritize the welfare of others. I'd like to close with a short piece from a prayer about serving others, written by the 8th century Buddhist master Shantideva. I hope you find resonance in these words within your own spiritual context. May I become a protector for the protectorless, a guide for those who travel on the road, and for those who wish to cross the water. May I become a boat, a ship, or a bridge. May I become an island for those seeking dry land, a lamp for those needing light, a place of rest for those who desire one, and a servant for those needing service. To benefit all living beings, may I become a treasury of wealth, powerful prayers, and potent medicine. Just like the great elements such as earth and like eternal space, may I become the basis from which everything arises for sustaining the life of countless living beings. And until they have passed beyond sorrow, may I sustain all forms of life throughout the realms of living beings. Thank you.
And thank you for that, Chief McMullen. We appreciate it. All right, now I would like to invite Albuquerque's Mayor, Tim Keller, to say a few words.
Well, good afternoon. First and foremost, for our visitors and guests, I want to thank everyone who's here today to honor all that happened on September 11, but especially our first responders. And I also want to acknowledge, I think, part of the September 11 legacy is answering the call to public service. And we're joined here today by two groups of folks who are answering that call literally as we speak, to replenish our own ranks here in the city of Albuquerque. And so I want to acknowledge our fire cadets and our police cadets. Let's give them a round of applause and thank them for answering that call. You know, it was 22 years ago today that our world changed forever. And we take time out of our days today to reflect on that moment in time when we all witnessed the unimaginable. We watched those towers fall. We watched our Pentagon being attacked. We watched Flight 93 crash into the Pennsylvania field because of the heroism on that flight of those individuals who prevented that plane from hitting yet another target. And all of a sudden, it felt like the world was crumbling around us. Now, I know this happened 22 years ago, and it is a reminder for those of us who were adults back then how much time has passed and how now there's a whole generation who does not remember staring at those television screens, thinking of all the people that we knew or know in New York, in that area, in DC, wondering what's happening to them, wondering what's happening to that country. That terrible feeling of uncertainty, that stoppage of everything we were doing, every single thing. The only conversation that America and the world was having that day was about what was happening. We share this because sometimes as time grows on, and we know this, whether it's from world wars or other tragedies that we've been through, we forget it's impossible for a new generation to understand exactly what that was like. The least we can do is take a little bit of time to remind people exactly what that was like, and also remind them what it did for our country. So for us, it is about that clarion call to never forget. It's more than a slogan, it's a promise. It's a promise to honor the memory of the innocent lives lost, of the heroes that responded in our darkest hour, and also to never forget that we need to pass these stories on. There was a moment, we remember this, those of us who were around during this time, a couple of days after September 11, when truly our country was on the cusp of anger and of despair. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know who to blame. And of course, we did what unfortunately we do in our human experience. When we don't know, we first blame each other. We saw that hatred turn initially on itself to parts of our population. But then very quickly, America does what it also does. We came together. We demonstrated unity like we had not seen in decades. I remember seeing the steps of the Capitol building, Republicans and Democrats. I remember seeing people visiting the September 11th site actually in downtown Manhattan. It did not matter your background. It did not matter your beliefs. We were all united as Americans. That is the other message from September 11 that we need to never forget. I know for us, no matter what's happening in our country today, in the last few years or going forward, whether it's the insurrection that we saw on those same steps just a few years ago, or whether it's our knee-jerk reactions to often blame each other for our challenges around crime or homelessness, we must remember that unifying message of September 11 also. We are in this together. We are stronger together, and we need each other. That is what we in Albuquerque call the power of us. And I'm grateful to see whether it's the cadets before you, or it's the leadership behind me, or it's the men and women of our military right here in New Mexico, who each and every day put country or state or city above self. And they do not blame, they do not point fingers. They ask how they can help, and they do that each and every day. That is something I never forget as your mayor. So today I ask you to remember this, and also remember that we live in a special place. Whether it's our country, or it's our state, or it's our city. I'm grateful to live here. I'm grateful to be in this community raising my family with each and every one of you. God bless Albuquerque, and God bless America.
Thanks for that, Mayor Keller. Right now, I'd like to invite the IAFF Local 244 President, Miguel Tittman, to say a few words. Mike is funny.
Good afternoon, Albuquerque. Thank you for sharing this moment of remembrance with us. Thank you to the city councilors, the dignitaries, the directors. Thank you, Mayor Keller, for joining us. I see a lot of dignitaries out there in the audience, directors of important city functions. I see the chief of staff, deputy chief of staff for the governor. Thank you, and please relay to the governor that we appreciate her showing up since I can remember to watch us climb every single year. The former president of the Fraternal Order of Police, I can see out there. Thank you all for sharing this moment of remembrance with us. My name is Miguel Tittman, and I represent the IAFF Local 244's 900 plus rank and file firefighters in Albuquerque Fire Rescue and Bernalillo County Fire Rescue, as well as the 2,000 plus firefighters in the New Mexico Professional Firefighters Association. And we are proud members of the International Association of Firefighters, comprised of more than 340,000 firefighters across North America. All of which, in some fashion, are doing the same thing we're doing right now, remembering and honoring the fallen, mourning the lives lost, and praying for the families left to pick up the pieces 22 years later. 9/11 has a significant meaning to everyone old enough to remember where they were that fateful day, as well as to the youth who learn about this unignorable historical event in our U.S., the imagery and the aftermath woven into the fabric of our country. How the tragic loss of 2,753 souls, along with the threat of a new kind of terror, was felt across every corner of the world. For me and my immediate family, 9/11 was already significant, as my wife celebrates her birthday today. If you see her, please wish her a happy birthday. For my fire family, 9/11 has become a day to be solemnly cherished, more than any other. In a profession whose history is filled with the repeated sacrifice of our bravest, spanning hundreds of years, today, my brothers and sisters are reminded of the largest loss of life in any single event in the history of the fire service. Today we stand and we climb in solidarity with the 9,000 IAFF Local 94 FDNY's Uniformed Firefighters Association members. 22 years ago, 343 firefighters perished from Local 94, from FDNY. Entire crews lost, entire stations lost. The way in which we, the IAFF firefighters, honor those 343 is to climb the height of the Twin Towers, 110 flights of stairs at 8:46 a.m. every September 11th, the exact same time that the first plane hit. I'd like to recognize everybody who climbed here today. We appreciate you sacrificing a little bit of your morning. There's no possible way to climb 110 flights without contemplating what those brave firefighters were facing that day. The chaos that was presented in those buildings, the stairwells, the lobbies, the worst affected floors, we can only use our imaginations of what might have been going through their minds at that time. Stay focused. Remember your training. Pace yourself. Keep going. Help that woman. It's getting hotter. We must be getting close. I'm probably not going to survive this. I hope my kids will be okay. Keep going. Keep going. The horror of that headspace is difficult to imagine, but in their honor, that's exactly what we do every year on 9/11. We sweat and we struggle up 110 flights as we try to imagine the fear and the courage possessed by the immortal 343 to go to work that day. The attitude of sacrifice and selflessness exhibited that day is a standard of professionalism strived for in the fire service. Courage in the face of fear. But we not only climb in honor of the lost 343 FDNY firefighters, the 23 NYPD officers, and the 37 Port Authority officers. The over 1,100 have developed occupational cancer from ground zero cleanup, and the over 7,000 FDNY and EMTs who have suffered 9/11 illness or injury since. We also climb in honor of their crowning collective achievement. Today holds so special in the fire service as we also recognize the execution of the greatest rescue of human life in history. And that is, at its foundation, what being a firefighter is about, the preservation of life. It is said that 50,000 people are present in the World Trade Center, were present in the World Trade Center on any given day. It is estimated that up to 15,000 people were directly helped to safety from the rescue efforts of the first responders and civilian heroes that day. This rescue effort cannot be overlooked. It must be celebrated and honored by all who remember September 11th, along with the victims. I recently was lucky enough to visit 9/11 just 2 weeks ago. Visit the 9/11 Museum at Ground Zero in New York City 2 weeks ago. Overwhelmed is the only way I can explain the feeling of the many accounts of survivors. They gave us a flyover. Overwhelmed is the only way I can explain the feeling of the many accounts of survivors that told the stories of the 343 and their actions that day that helped save countless lives. I hope that I can return one day again. I hope that all get a chance to experience that museum once in their life. If you do, give yourself an entire day, as it takes an entire day to walk that museum. So though today is a day of great sorrow in remembering the lost, we must also continue to celebrate what was achieved that day by my brothers in FDNY. Here in Albuquerque, the IFF will never forget. Every September 11th, we will gather here in Civic Plaza, and we will climb 110 floors, and we will honor the fallen by remembering their sacrifice in what was the greatest rescue ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Tidman. Appreciate that. Okay, now I would like to invite Albuquerque Fire Rescue's Fire Chief, Jaramillo, to say a few words.
It's a little low, so I'm going to have to hold it, or it's going to tip over. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. I normally have no problem sitting down and writing a speech for one of our ceremonies, and over the past week, I really struggled with taking notes to write for this ceremony, and I think part of it is because this is such a somber event for firefighters, for first responders, for Americans, as we reflect back on 9/11. And so as we reflect on the victims of the 9/11 attacks, like the numbers, we've already stated the numbers, 343 firefighters, 60 police officers. There was 2,343 troops killed in Operation Enduring Freedom. There was a lot of life lost, both civilian, first responder, on 9/11. And as we reflect on the efforts on 9/11 and the days, the months, the years after, there are many words that describe the actions of those first responders. It comes to mind sacrifice, courage, heroes, service above self. These are all things that are principles of taking on a career as a first responder, and were demonstrated that day by everybody that did respond to Ground Zero. Some of the sacrifices are obvious, and some are more subtle. President Tidman mentioned the occupational cancer that arose out of 9/11, and I want to touch on that today because it's something that doesn't get as much of attention. At the beginning of September, they inventoried the number of FDNY lives lost as a result of occupational cancer traced back to 9/11, and the number is up to 341. So there was 343 lives lost on 9/11, and since 9/11, 341 firefighters have lost their lives to occupational cancer. So think about that for a moment. It's almost the exact same number that were lost on Ground Zero. We reflect on the tragedy of Ground Zero, but something that came out of that is research related to occupational cancer for firefighters. It's not something that was ever really thought of. It was nothing that was studied, and since then, because of Ground Zero, we've been able to make great strides as fire departments across the nation to protect our firefighters from the risks of occupational cancer. We're very lucky in our state to have presumptive cause, where firefighters that contract cancer are covered medically for certain types of cancer. We, talking to firefighters earlier today as we were climbing the stairs, we were talking about how we would just let our gear get so dirty and filthy from fires because it was a badge of honor to have all that dirty gear from all of the fires that you were in. We now wash our gear after every fire so that we can protect ourselves, so that we do not have to suffer or reduce our risk of cancer. And that's something that did come out of Ground Zero. And as we reflect on all of the somber nature of what happened, the firefighters that respond to that emergency have really helped the fire service take strides to protect firefighters now and in the future from that occupational cancer. So I'd like to tie this back at the end, just back to that sacrifice. But I want to take a moment, since we've talked about a lot of how firefighters and first responders sacrifice their own lives that day, but I want to touch on also the sacrifices made by our families. It's a tough job. You leave your family, you're with your fire family about a third of your working life at a fire station, and your family members are back home doing life without you, and it's a big challenge for our family members. One of my favorite quotes out of 9/11, there was great quotes, presidents, elected officials, amazing quotes, but my favorite quote from 9/11 is from Sandy Dahl, and she's the wife of the Flight 93 pilot. And she said, if we learn nothing else from this tragedy, we learn that life is short and there is no time for hate. I like that quote because as we reflect on 9/11, and just like Mayor said, the unity that we felt as a nation post 9/11 was something that would, if you didn't experience it, very hard to describe. And it would be really great to feel that again. And so as I look out at our first responders, and we talked about this morning, we are a lot stronger when we work together than when we're divided. So today, as we reflect on the sacrifices that were made, I would just like us all to remember that one piece. We are a lot stronger when we are not divided. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Okay, at this time, we would like to invite Chief Jaramillo and the Albuquerque Fire Rescue Retirees Association to perform the last alarm presentation known as Striking the 4 Fives. Immediately following the last alarm presentation, APD will begin their 21-gun salute. This tradition is very loud as blank shots are fired, so please make necessary adjustments for noise-sensitive attendees.
In coordination with the Albuquerque Fire Department Retirees Association, I will now read about the striking of the 4 Fives. The fire service custom of rendering final honors with a series of bell strikes has its origin in fire departments of old. Years ago, before the advent of radios, pagers, and cell phones, fire alarms and daily announcements were dispatched from the department's central headquarters to outlying firehouses by a series of bell commands. Each alarm or announcement had its own number and series of bell strikes. The custom of rendering final honors to our departed comrades is known in the fire service as striking the 4 Fives. When a firefighter responded on his or her last alarm, headquarters would transmit 5 bell strikes, repeated 4 times, followed by the announcement that a firefighter had passed away. In keeping with this tradition, on this over 20-year anniversary of the horrific events of 9/11, and in honor of all the brave men and women that lost their lives that day, I am issuing the order to strike the 4 Fives. The signal of the 4-5 has been transmitted. It is with deep respect the Albuquerque Fire Department Retirees Association mourns the death of those that died on this day over 20 years ago. At the Albuquerque Fire Academy, we have a special 9/11 tribute as a way for honoring the lives lost on 9/11 at the AFR. We have a way of honoring them at the AFR Training Academy. Cadets,
First class, cadet class, attention! The 9/11 tribute! It is the sad duty of the fire department to remember 343 of our brothers lost their lives today while operating at Firebox 8087, the World Trade Center, New York City. May Almighty God grant their heroism live forever in our hearts. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten, sir!
thank you.
Okay, and that concludes our 9/11 memorial ceremony. Thank you all for attending.